If you are still listening, it means you are not here for entertainment, but for something far rarer in this age: clarity, direction, and a way to rebuild yourself from the inside out. And I want you to understand from the beginning that what you are about to hear is not theory, not inspiration, and not temporary motivation that fades when life becomes difficult again, but a Stoic framework for daily transformation, one that does not depend on luck, environment, or talent, but on the way you think, the way you act, and the way you respond when life presses against you. Because improvement is not a single event, it is a daily discipline. And the difference between a life that expands and a life that collapses is not found in rare moments of success, but in ordinary decisions repeated consistently when no one is watching. And if you are willing to apply these 5 Stoic keynotes with patience and seriousness, your life will not simply improve, it will become structured, intentional, and unshakable. Beginning with the first principle, master your perception before attempting to change your circumstances, because nothing in life carries meaning until your mind assigns meaning to it. And most of human suffering is not born from reality itself, but from the interpretation of reality through an untrained mind. As Marcus Aurelius reflected deeply upon while governing an empire under constant pressure, reminding himself that external events are neutral until judgment turns them into either suffering or strength. And this is the first awakening you must undergo if you want to improve your life daily. You must stop assuming that your immediate, emotional reaction is truth, because it is not truth, it is habit. And when you learn to pause just for a moment before labeling something as good or bad, success or failure, insult or praise, you begin to reclaim control over your internal world. And in that space between event and interpretation lies your freedom, a freedom most people never realize they possess because they react faster than they reflect. And once you begin mastering perception, the second principle becomes possible. Govern your reactions. Do not be governed by them, because every unexamined reaction is a quiet surrender of self-mastery. And the difference between a chaotic life and a disciplined life is not the absence of emotional triggers, but the presence of restraint in the moment of trigger. And when anger rises, when disappointment hits, when fear tightens your thinking, the Stoic does not obey these forces blindly, but observes them as passing signals, not commands. And Epictetus taught this with uncompromising clarity when he explained that no one is free unless they are master of their own responses, meaning that your true life is not what happens to you, but how you respond to what happens to you. And if you can delay reaction long enough to choose response instead of impulse, you begin to build a form of inner authority that no external condition can easily disrupt. And with that authority comes the third principle: replace distraction with disciplined, intentional action, because modern life does not destroy people through hardship alone, but through fragmentation of attention, through constant stimulation, through endless scrolling, noise, comparison, and the illusion of productivity without substance. And what most people call being busy is often just avoidance disguised as movement. And improvement cannot coexist with scattered energy, because progress requires direction, not motion. And every day you either scatter your attention across meaningless inputs or you concentrate it into meaningful output. And the difference compounds over time until one life becomes structured and the other becomes chaotic. And Seneca warned that we do not suffer from lack of time, but from wasting it, not in large, obvious ways, but in small, unnoticed fragments that accumulate into a life that feels empty despite being constantly occupied. And this is why discipline is not restriction, but liberation, because it removes the noise that keeps you from building anything substantial. And when you begin choosing actions deliberately, reading instead of consuming, creating instead of reacting, building instead of distracting, you begin to feel a different kind of progress. One that is not emotional but structural, And from this discipline emerges the fourth principle. Treat adversity as training, not obstruction, because nothing in life arrives without purpose in the Stoic framework, even if that purpose is not immediately visible. And every obstacle you encounter is either revealing a weakness in your character or strengthening a muscle you did not know needed development. And the untrained mind sees difficulty as punishment, but the trained mind sees it as preparation. And the Stoic does not ask, why me in despair, but what is being trained in me through this moment? And when you adopt this mindset consistently, failure stops being an identity and becomes information. Rejection stops being a verdict and becomes direction. And pain stops being an enemy and becomes instruction. And in this way, adversity loses its power to destabilize you because it no longer defines you. It develops you. And finally, the fifth principle. Measure daily progress through character, not achievement, because achievement is external, unstable, and often dependent on forces outside your control. But character is internal, stable, and entirely yours to shape. And if you wake up each day and ask not, what can I gain today, but what kind of person will I become today, your entire orientation toward life begins to shift. And improvement becomes less about outcomes and more about integrity, less about recognition and more about consistency, less about winning moments and more about building identity. And when you measure your life by how you handled frustration, how you treated others, how you maintained discipline when it was inconvenient, you begin to understand that real progress is invisible before it becomes visible. And over time, these 5 principles begin to merge into a single way of living. Perception becomes clarity instead of distortion. Reactions become responses instead of impulses. Actions become intentional instead of scattered. Adversity becomes training instead of interruption. And character becomes the only true measure of success. And when this integration happens, you do not become someone who occasionally improves. You become someone whose default state is improvement. Not because life becomes easier, but because you become more stable within it, more aware within it, more deliberate within it. And this is the essence of Stoic transformation. Not control over everything outside you, but mastery over everything within you that interprets what is outside you. And once that mastery begins to take root, you will notice something subtle yet profound. That the same world you once found overwhelming begins to feel manageable. Not because it changed, but because you did. And that change is not dramatic in the beginning. It is quiet, almost invisible, but it compounds daily. And one day, you will realize that you no longer live in reaction to life, but in alignment with principles. And that is the point where life stops pulling you in every direction and starts moving through you with clarity, structure, and purpose. And if you can hold on to even a fraction of this discipline each day, not perfectly, not dramatically, but consistently, then your future self will not recognize the limitations that once defined you, because you will have slowly replaced them with something stronger, something quieter, something far more enduring. And that is what it truly means to improve your life every day in the Stoic sense. Not to escape difficulty, not to chase comfort, but to become the kind of person who remains steady, useful, and unbroken no matter what life delivers.